The hall, please stand up for the national anthem of Pakistan. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Excellency Dr. Alexander Papas, Director at CNRS National Center for Scientific Research, Paris, France. Dr. Triana Lyons, Department of Education and Liberal Arts, the University of Arizona, Global Campus, USA. Dr. Abu Sufyan Islahi, Aligarh Muslim University, India. Honorable Worthy Vice Chancellor, Allama Iqbal Open University, Professor Dr. Ziaul Qayyum. Dr. Mohiuddin Hashmi, Dean Faculty of Arabic and Islamic Studies. Dr. Ghulam Shamsur Rahman, Chairman, Department of Interfaith Studies. Dr. Herman, Professor of Comparative Religion at Minhaj University. Deans, Chairpersons, Principal Officers, Faculty, National and International Keynote Speakers, Presenters, Participants, Guests, and everyone. On behalf of Department of Interfaith Studies, Faculty of Arabic and Islamic Studies, I, Dr. Farooq Abdullah, welcome to one and all here today on 3 days international conference, Interfaith Relation, Challenges and Prospects. Ladies and gentlemen, we will commence the formal proceedings of today's event with the holy name of Allah. I would request Hafiz Ibtisamur Rahman, Research Associate, Center for Excellence, to recite few verses from Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى أن رآه استغنى إن إلى ربك الرجعى صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah. With submission, faith, and patience, you conveyed the noble message, brought us light through your guidance. Peace be upon you, my beloved, Ya Habibi, Ya Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For Naat Maqbool sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I would like to invite Hafiza Hafsa Majid from GC Women University, Faisalabad.
हुजूर आप आए तो दिल जगमगाए, हुजूर आप आए तो दिल जगमगाए, वरना लाचारों का क्या हाल होता, असीरों कनीज़ों पे क्या कुछ गुजरती, मुसीबत के मारों का क्या हाल होता, हुजूर आप आए तो दिल जगमगाए। आप आए हैं तो ये आई बहारें, हर सिमत सल्ले अला की पुकारे, हर सिमत सल्ले अला की पुकारे, जो माहे रबीउल अव्वल ना होता, जो माहे रबीउल अव्वल ना होता, तो फिर इन बहारों का क्या हाल होता, हुजूर आप आए तो दिल जगमगाए। सभी अंबिया के सलामी को आए, है यूसुफ बे बैठे है सर को झुकाए, यूसुफ बे बैठे है सर को झुकाए, इन सब में गर कमली वाले ना होते, इन सब में गर कमली वाले ना होते, तो लाखों हजारों का क्या हाल होता, हुजूर आप आए तो दिल जगमगाए,
Jazakallah. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference, Interfaith Relations, Challenges and Prospects, is jointly organized by the Department of Interfaith Studies, Faculty of Arabic and Islamic Studies, in collaboration with Higher Education Commission of Pakistan. Dear audience, Allah says in Quran in chapter 16, verse number 125, Ud'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal maw'izatil hasanati wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan. Invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom and good instruction, and argue with them in a way that is best. Dear audience, the conference organizing team strongly believe that throughout human history, interfaith harmony has always been important for well-being, peace, and progress. Interfaith harmony is the most important and essential for the global progress and development. Allah says in Quran, قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعَالَوْا إِلَىٰ كَلِمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ. Say, O people of the scripture, come to an agreement between us that we shall worship none but Allah. Albert Einstein famously stated, peace cannot be kept by force, it can only be achieved by understanding. This conference will provide an excellent context zone for the national and international academia, researchers, and social scientists to involve in intercultural dialogue, which will further promote and strengthen ties between the different religions. Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us today Dr. Shamsur Rahman, Chairman, Department of Interfaith Studies. Dr. Shamsur Rahman holds his PhD in Islamic Studies from the Institute of Arabic and Islamic Studies, University of Exeter, UK. He also completed his postdoctoral research from Chatham House, London in 2011. His research interests principally lie in the study of comparative religious studies, Sufism, Islamic jurisprudence, and in editing of Arabic and Persian manuscripts. I now give the floor upon Dr. Shamsur Rahman to come and give welcome note to the audience, please.
First of all, please accept my deepest apologies to those who come in time in this hall. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulil kareem. Amma ba'd, fawz billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Rabbi yassir wa la tu'assir wa tammim bil khair. Honorable Vice Chancellor, distinguished guests, respectable colleagues, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. It's a matter of great privilege and distinct honor for me and for my university to welcome all of you in this significant conference on interfaith relations, challenges and prospects. The Department of Islamic Studies of the Faculty of Islamic and Arabic Studies is a recent addition to the intellectual opportunities available at Allama Iqbal Open University, Islamabad. The department seeks to advance interfaith studies through academic programs, scholarly seminars, trainings, and outreach initiatives. Its mission is to promote interreligious harmony and peace building. Ladies and gentlemen, persistent stresses in our pluralistic global world make understanding the complex nature of interfaith relations more important than ever before. Although attempts towards fellowship between religious groups are not new, our post-colonial and post-modern era marked by socio-political change at individual and state level calls for a fresh appraisal of the historical legacy. We must engage deeply with the religious scripture in order to develop parameters, strategies, and ethical frameworks for sustainable interfaith relations. Revisiting these key texts with an open mind will foster accord among diverse religious traditions, including long-strayed sects with different traditions, or within a single tradition as well. A critical study of the responses of leading religious scholars is crucial for moving beyond extremism, inequality, discrimination in the context of interfaith relations. Huntington's clash of civilization in the last decade of 20th century attracted the religious scholars, policymakers, and politicians to revisit the interreligious relations in the contemporary period. Beyond the academic implications of the theory, it brought the religious and interreligious relations to public discussion. A plethora of literature has been produced to show the hostile nature of interfaith relations by highlighting minor events of interreligious conflicts. On the other hand, some scholars focused to present the amiable interfaith relations. I would like to mention here too, sorry for being too professorial. First, Zakhare Karabel's Peace Be Upon You, the Story of Muslims, Christians, and Jewish Coexistence, published in 2008. It reveals the history of peaceful coexistence between Muslim, Christians, and Jews over the course of 14 centuries until the present day. Zakhare criticized the clash of civilization model. He asserts that Abrahamic monotheism coexists in peace with its fundamental in all three Abrahamic religions. There were small intervals where conflicts, ethnic strifes, and interreligious competitions occurred, but a long history of coexistence and congenial relationship cannot be disregarded. Karabel's write, quote unquote, Muslim Spain was the most vibrant place on earth. He outlined the long, nuanced history of peace, tolerance, and cooperation from the court of caliphs of Baghdad to present-day Dubai, where members of various faiths are working side by side. That is a remarkable symbol of peace. The second scholarly work is Maria Rosa's The Ornament of the World, How Muslims, Jews, Christians Created a Culture of Tolerance in Medieval Spain. I would like here to mention unique congenial relationships between Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism in medieval India, where we hardly found theological polemics among the adherents of various religions. Rather, bhakti trends, perennial philosophy, or wujudi thoughts prevailed in academic and social relations. In this historical context, we aim to discuss recent trends in the comparative religious studies and invited original contributions from participating scholars who wish to share their perceptions of core issues related to interfaith relations and interfaith studies. The event will bring together social scientists, policymakers, religious scholars to exchange ideas on principal concepts of conference, providing them with an excellent opportunity for networking, peer-to-peer discussions, and research collaborations. We have invited and encouraged leading experts and as well as emerging scholars from around the world to present their contributions in all areas of interfaith relations, particularly Islam and interfaith, Sirah Nabawiyya and interfaith studies, intrafaith studies, modernity, extremism, ecology, environmental issues, human rights issues, and peace and violence, and interfaith studies, discriminations, and scriptural reasoning, and method and approaches towards interfaith studies. On these significant themes, we received about 100 abstracts from across the country and abroad, which show the interest of academia and religious scholars in the themes of the conference. I appreciate the members of review committee who scrutinized these abstracts and proposals and selected almost half of them for presentation in this conference. These papers will be presented in 5 sessions of the conference. Moreover, we will conduct 2 extensive panel discussions on substantial themes, namely methods and approaches to interfaith studies and interfaith and religious interpretations. I'm indeed grateful to all our invited speakers who accepted our humble invitation and will grace the event by participating in the discussions. Finally, I do acknowledge the administrative and financial cooperation and assistance provided us by the Office of Vice Chancellor, Dean Office, Registrar Office, Security and State Office, and Printing Press. Moreover, we are thankful to Higher Education Commission for financial assistance even in the midst of financial crunch. I extend my special thanks to Professor Alexandre Papas, who accepted our invitation, and though we delayed our conference for a week, even then he came here. Thank you very much, Papas. Papas is a professor currently, he's a professor of Sufism and interfaith studies, not interfaith studies, but he worked a lot on interfaith studies as well. And he is director of National Institute of Scientific Research at Paris University. Moreover, he is heading Ottoman Center of Studies as well there. I also appreciate Dr. Trina Lyons. He is basically a true lover of Pakistan. He worked a lot on Pakistani history, art, and culture. She is working here from last 20 years, and I appreciate her work, and of course, many of you know her very well. No need to introduce Professor Dr. Abu Sufyan Islai. We are very thankful to him, and he came here on our humble request. He recently edited a book of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's Tabjeenul Kalam, which is, according to him, considered one of the basic book on interfaith relations, in a sense that Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, according to him, is the first person who completed Bible commentary of Bible in South Asia, in entire history of South Asian at least. Similarly, we are very thankful to Professor Herman Robro, who came here from Lahore. He's currently heading their chair on Comparative Studies Department. Thank you very much, all of you. I hope the conference will explore the new dimensions of research in the field of interfaith studies, which may bridge interfaith relation, response to the challenges, and create the opportunities. And finally, let me appreciate, I actually don't have words to express my gratitude to my Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Ziaul Qayyum, who motivated me to organize this conference, and we become able to organize this conference. I'm very delighted, we are very delighted. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shams, for your brief introduction about this conference and analysis of the possibilities of intercultural dialogue in the contemporary age. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would seek the privilege to introduce our foreign guest, Dr. Alexander Papas. Dr. Shams explained already. He is a director at CNRS, National Center for Scientific Research, professor at Practical School for Advanced Studies, Paris, France. His work mainly deals with Sufi mysticism, politico-religious issues in Central Asia and neighboring areas, China, Tibet, India, and Pakistan. He also has been a visiting professor at the Kyoto University, Japan, Ohio State University, USA, the American University of Paris. His publications include more than 60 articles. He is currently executive editor of the Journal of Sufi Studies, which is listed in Brill Academic Publishers. I will now request the Excellency for his keynote address to the audience, please. Dear audience, please welcome and put your hands together for Dr. Alexander.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. First of all, I would like to address my very sincere thanks to the Department of Interfaith Studies, the Faculty of Arabic and Islamic Studies, and the Allama Iqbal Open University here in Islamabad. And on a more personal note, I would like also to thank very cheerfully Professor Dr. Ghulam Shamsur Rahman, Professor Zia Ul-Qayyum, and Professor Hashimi, also present here. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here and to give this keynote to the international conference we are starting right now. My keynote will be a focused keynote, not a general statement, and it will be focusing on the contribution of Sufi studies, not on Sufism, but on Sufi studies, to interfaith studies. What I'm going to do basically, it's three things. I will try to first to define what I understand by Sufism. Also, there are many different definitions for what is Islamic mysticism. And at the same time, I will try also to define what I understand as Sufi studies, what means the study of Sufism in terms of discipline and of academic knowledge. And after that, I would like to, in a second time, to discuss different approaches of Sufi studies, mainly three approaches that I'm going to discuss with you briefly. Since I think there is a dichotomy, or there was a dichotomy in Sufi studies, which can be, I think, the best, and we can go beyond this dichotomy, hopefully. And in the third part of my keynote, I will introduce a few perspectives of, let's say, comparative religion, on very precise and even technical points where I think we can have a fruitful discussion about how to discuss the similitudes and the differences between different spiritual traditions, so Sufism and other spiritual traditions. So as I said, it's not a general keynote, but it's a focused keynote. As I take as an example for me as a source of inspiration, a distinction made by the French philosopher that you may know, Michel Foucault, who died in 1984, who was a great enlightener for French, not only for French, I hope, but for other intellectuals. And he made this distinction in 1972, a long time ago, between the universal intellectual, talking about many things, like Jean-Paul Sartre was the example, par excellence of the universal intellectual. And Michel Foucault distinguished the universal intellectual, talking about every kind of topics, to the specific intellectual, called in French the intellectual spécifique, which has an area of specialization and who can deal with general questions that we will discuss together, I hope, but from his main field of specialization, not from other kinds of knowledge that he doesn't have. So it's a sort of exercise of humbleness that Michel Foucault proposed to scholars. So, as been said, I'm supposedly a specialist of Sufism, of Islamic mysticism, so I'm going to give you my understanding at the very basic level of what can be called Sufism or Islamic mysticism. I think it can be defined in three characteristics. The first, it's the efforts made by the mystic to reach God not only after death, but during lifetime, and this on the model of the Prophet Muhammad himself. To follow the Prophet himself is a way to get closer to God and to become a true mystic or a true mystical believer. That's the first definition of Sufism, and it's a constant lifetime effort. A second characteristic of Sufism to me, it's a set of specific practices of spiritual practices to carry out this effort to get closer and closer to God. There are, for example, contemplation, murakaba, exercises, which is a specific practice of Sufis. Another one is the khalwat, khalwa, halvet, and the different pronunciation of the main languages of the Muslim world, which is the spiritual retreat or seclusion, which is, again, a specific practices with technical aspects performed by Sufis. And a third characteristics, it's a historical phenomenon. It is, in few words, the progressive, gradual organization of Sufism into different paths and orders, which is called tariqa or taifa. There are many words to define this organization of Sufism through different brotherhoods or orders, whatever you call them. I will return on this point later on. And this is, again, something specific to Islamic mysticism. This is not true for all mystical traditions if we have to compare and to discuss the interfaith. So this is something very particular. It doesn't mean that Sufism is only summarized to Sufi orders. This is not the case, but it's a historical reality that we must take into account if we want to understand how Sufism evolved since the medieval period, since the 9th, 10th century to nowadays, since it's still alive in tradition. So that's my understanding of Sufism, and maybe we will have to discuss this later on. In terms of discipline of approach, there is a growing now, at least in the West, there is a growing field of research called Sufi studies, or études sur le soufisme in French, which designates an almost independent discipline or independent field of research, focusing on Sufism, as I try to define it, but using different scholarly methods. The most obvious methods of approaching, of studying Sufism is, of course, Islamic studies, and we have departments of Islamic studies here and there in the East and the West, so to say. That's the most obvious place to study Sufism. Also, another very obvious approach in terms of department, it's the Department of Religious Studies or Interfaith studies, which are a natural place for the study of Sufism. But there is more than this. I think we can also study Sufism, and again, I hope we will have discussions about this, not as specialists of Islamic studies, not even as specialists of religious studies, but as, for example, simple historians, because Sufism is, and every mysticism, every spiritual tradition is a historical phenomena. So it can be studied from a historical point of view through, for example, periodization, studying major events, things like this in the history of Sufism. So that's a historical approach of Sufism that can be defined. Another approach is the ethnography and anthropology. Since we are dealing with a living tradition, whatever we think about the evolution of Sufism today, it's a contemporary fact that still exists almost everywhere in the Muslim world, in Muslim countries, but also in non-Muslim countries. We have Sufi and Sufi groups in France, in Europe, in the US. They are everywhere. So it's a very interesting topic for the anthropologists or the ethnographers, the ethnologists to study the actual and the acting Sufi groups or Sufi individuals today embedded in this contemporary world. Another approach is the literary studies, literature, since most of the Oriental, so to say, literature, let's say Arabic, Persian, and Turkish literature, but there are many others, like Urdu, poetry in particular, is fueled by mysticism. For many classical poetry, I think in particular of Persian, but not only Persian, the system of reference is Sufi. It's Sufism, and it belongs to the Sufi way of thinking and the Sufi intellectual tradition, more than any others. So literature and literary studies, they have something to say about Sufism. A last approach, it's art history, but this is a part of history, it's art, and I would focus also on one subfield, which is musicology. since, and this is maybe unexpected, but musicology has also something to say about Sufism for a very simple reason. It's that part of the musical tradition here in India and Pakistan, but also in Iran, the Caucasus, Central Asia, and Turkey, also Anatolia, part of the musical tradition come from the Sufi orders. And we even have cases of Sufi authors who compose music. A very famous one is Abdurrahman Jami, who was the 15th century polymath from Herat, who wrote in Persian, who composed a treatise of music, Risalah-i Musiqi, in Persian, which is a very classical treatise. So he was an Naqshbandi Sufi, writing in many different kinds of writings, but also including a treatise about music, which says something about the culture of Sufism related to musical tradition. There are many examples like this that could be mentioned. So you see, I'm trying to defend the fact that we can approach Islamic mysticism, but any kind of spiritual tradition, from very different fields and disciplines. As I said very briefly in the beginning, it's a growing field of Sufi studies. And I think the best signs, best manifestations of this growing field of Sufi studies, it's more than a fashion, it's really a growing field of research. It's a series of publications in the West, I'm just talking about the West, devoted to Sufism. We have, for example, in French, scholarly journal established in the year 2000, so more than 20 years ago now, called Journal d'Histoire du Soufisme, which can be translated simply in English as Journal of the History of Sufism. We have also the Journal of Sufi Studies established in 2012 by Bril, that I have the honor to supervise, which is a scholarly journal devoted to Sufism. In the international standard, we also have a series, several series devoted to Sufism at Bril Publishing academic house. And particularly, there are two series devoted to Sufism. One is Studies on Sufism. It's called like this, and there are already, I think, 8 or 9 books, or 7 or 8 books published in this series, and I hope that there will be another title by my colleague Shamsur Rahman soon, including in this series. And another one is a series of Handbook of Sufi Studies, which is devoted to the introduction of different main Sufi topics to the general readership. And the last fact, which is interesting in terms of the establishment of a field of Sufi studies, it's the fact that we have, in the case of Turkey, this is an example of contemporary Turkey, we have departments of Sufi studies in each divinity schools of universities throughout Turkey. It's called in Turkish Tasawwuf Anabilim Dala, which means these departments of Sufi studies in every, almost all divinity schools in Turkey. So, if I still have time, I would like to now to introduce the two main approaches and a third one of Sufism. The first, it's what I would call Tasawwuf studies, taking from the Arabic word translating Sufism. The Tasawwuf approach, it's devoted to the doctrinal or the theoretical aspects of Sufism. It has a long history in Western studies, or relatively long history, which started with Reynold Nicholson, the British scholar, who died in 1945, who wrote this seminal book entitled, it was in 1914, published in 1914, a book entitled The Mystics of Islam, which was, in a sense, the first study of Sufism from the doctrinal point of view. He described his project like this: it was a study of the religious, I quote, the religious philosophy of Islam, that aims to set forth the mystic central doctrine. So in his book, in this founding book, after providing a summary of the historical development of Sufism, from the early ascetics, from the early Zuhad, to later mystics, and noting the purported external influences, according to him, that is Christianity, but also Neoplatonism, which is a philosophy which emerged in the second and third century after Christ. Gnosticism, which is also a spiritual tradition founded on gnosis, on knowledge, which developed from the third century, and also Buddhism. So, according to Nicholson, there were these external influences to Sufism. And then in his book, he focused on more classical themes like divine light, agnostic knowledge, and love for God, devotional love for God, which all rest, according to him, on a pantheistic faith, which was a misunderstanding, a fundamental misunderstanding of Sufism, probably. So it was a founding book, but at the same time a misinterpretation of the doctrinal foundation of Sufism. As a French, I have to quote a French example also of publication which was important in the field, which has been published in 1965. So it's a long history that I'm just summarizing with a few titles. It was a book titled Les Mystiques Musulmans, so the Muslim mystics, by Marie-Jeanne Mollet, who was actually Sloven, Iranologist based in France, who wrote this essay about Muslim mystics, but he was mainly interested, most of the book is devoted to Sufi practices rather than the history. But he tried to understand the different Sufi practices, for example, Sama, the experience of Sama, of spiritual concert, if we can translate it that way, from the doctrinal point of view, trying to understand that this is not simply music, this is not entertainment, this is not an experience of pleasure, this is not a concert like the other ones. He tried to understand Sama as a spiritual experience, as the hearing of the vibration of the divine words, not simply of music, which was, I think, an interesting doctrinal approach of a Sufi practice. So that's the first trend or the first tradition of scholarly study of Sufism, again, in the West. Another one, and I call it Tasawwuf approach. Another one is the Tariqa approach, which means the study of Sufism through the Sufi orders, through its political and social manifestations. Again, there are two books which can be considered as the most representative scholarly studies and publications about this Tariqa approach. The first is a famous book by John Spencer Trimingham, entitled The Sufi Orders in Islam, published in 1971, where he was Scottish, I think. He was a Scottish historian who reconsidered the historical developments of the brotherhoods of the different tariqa, the different turuk, according to him, to three stages that he called, so he called these stages Hanaka, the Sufi Lodge stage, which was the first stage in the medieval period, which saw the formation of circles of elites. The second stage he called the Tariqa stage, the path stage, which saw the development of what he calls the bourgeois mysticism, which is an interesting notion, which means the institutionalization of Sufism. And a third stage that he called the Taifa stage of the development of Sufism, where he thinks Sufism became a popular and crowded movement that fragmented into multiple lineages and where the cult of sense dominated. And Trimingham bemoans, he regrets this decline of Sufism, since it came from the epitome of high spirituality to what he considered vulgar mysticism. Another book, again, it's a French book published in 1996, more recently, called Les Voies d'Allah, which means the path of Allah, the path of God, edited by my former mentor when I was a young student, Alexandre Popovich and Gilles Weinstein, who were historians themselves, and who proposed a book which was mainly a historical study of Sufism across the Muslim world. It's in French. so not very accessible to an English readership. But it was a sort of first synthesis about the historical development of Sufism with and rejecting the discourse of decline. They rejected the thesis of decline. They just explained that this is the evolution of Sufism throughout time, and we don't have to evaluate if it's right or wrong, if it's bad or if it's decline or progress. It's just a series of facts that we have to accept that Islamic mysticism, like other mystical traditions, evolved in this sense. So that was a sort of provocative approach of Sufism, but with a complete indifference to the doctrinal aspect, to the thought. So what I would like to defend here, it's a sort of third way or alternative way, which would go beyond this tasawwuf approach and tariqa approach, and trying to do both. That is to understand the phenomenon, for example, of Sufi orders, but without neglecting the doctrinal aspect and the intellectual aspect of this evolution. I call this an institutional approach of Sufism that I try to defend in a book that I published in 2020 at Brille, where I try to find a third way, an alternative way between this too radical approach of Sufism. One, I think it's too spiritualizing and think that Sufis live in the air, which is not the case. They are just human beings among other human beings. But another way, it's a reductive approach, trying to understand the Islamic mysticism only from the social and political perspective, which is, again, wrong. So I think it's possible to have a third way, which would go beyond this dichotomy between pure spirituality or pure politics, if you like. So now, so maybe we'll have the time to discuss also these different possible approaches of Sufi studies. Now we'd like to, if I still have time, I hope. Interfaith. Yes. So now I'm going to introduce a few perspective about interfaith studies, which is the topic of our conference. I would like to trace two perspectives. One is it's about the notion of Sufi order, which is a very problematic notion to describe tariqa or taifa or jama. These are all these terms possible to describe the Sufi lineages or silsila. In English, it's traditionally used Sufi order or Sufi brotherhood, Sufi order most of the time. The problem of this term, but it's an interesting problem because it comes from the Christian tradition of the monastic orders that we have, especially in the Catholic institutional history. And this ordre Sufi, these Sufi orders developed from the 12th and 13th century, which is a contemporary phenomenon in Christianity too, where we have this development of ordre monastique, of monastic orders also at the same time, especially in Western Europe among the Catholics. Of course, to use this, to say Sufi orders seems wrong because, for example, there is no, contrary to the monastic order, there is no celibacy, which is the case in the monastic order. Sufis don't live in monasteries. Sufis they have to work, they have to be active, they have to have family and social life, etc., which makes a big difference with the Christian or the monastic order. But at the same time, and I think it's a matter of discussion for interfaith studies, there are similarities. For example, in monastic orders, there are a series of rules that must be applied by the members. There are also, in the life of Hanukkah, there are a series of adab, adab al-Sufiya or adab al-Suhba, for example. So the rules of companionship, which are very precise, very technical, and they're comparable to what we can find in the regula, the rules of the monastic orders in Christian Europe. Another comparative point is, for example, the initiation process, where you enter a tariqa. When you become a member, you become a murid, a disciple of a master. There is an initiation process, and they're very different from one Sufi order to another. But again, in the monastic order, there is also an initiation ritual. So in terms of rituals, there are things which are not the same, but they are comparable. Other aspects could be also devoted and discussed at length, but I have not so much time. At Sufi order, it's the economical aspects of Sufi communities or of Christian communities, where they are also comparable. If I still have time, I would like to talk about one point of comparison about practices, about spiritual practices, because I think it's one of the main promising fields for comparison. As you all know, a main central practice among Sufis is the zikr. That is the repetition and the calling of the name of God. It can be in Sufism, it can be practiced individually or collectively, it can be oral, but it can be also silent. And the aim is to imprint the presence, the divinely presence in your heart by repeating the name. It's very common in Sufi practices. And there are many different forms, many different practices related to the zikr performance. Again, there are comparisons possible, which are difficult to trace, but I think it's a field of research. A comparison possible between zikr and a spiritual technique in Christianity, it's a technique called hesychasm, which comes from the Greek, hesychasmos in Greek, which means calmness and immobility. And this is practice, it's a kind of repetitive, contemplative prayer performed by Greek Orthodox monks. There is one place that maybe you heard about, which is called the Mount Athos. It's in northern Greece. It's a peninsula in northern Greece, which is composed of 20 monasteries of Orthodox Christian monasteries only. So it's only for the monks. There is no other people. There is no women allowed in this peninsula. Only men can enter. And if I can talk about myself, I had the experience to go there. Normally, you're not allowed to go. You have to ask for permission. It's a long process, and you can stay only 3 or 4 days. That's it on Mount Athos. Otherwise, you have to be a monk to live there. But I had the opportunity to go there and to assist to this hesychasm form of prayer, which is a contemplative prayer, which is very comparable. I don't say it's the same, but it's very comparable in terms of techniques with the zikr of the Sufis. And this is practiced for during hours by these Orthodox monks in Mount Athos and elsewhere in Orthodox monasteries. And their life is devoted to prayer and to contemplation. And a last point of comparison between zikr and another spiritual practice is it's with the Buddhist traditions. And again, this is something I have not experienced myself, but attended when I was in Japan. When I was a visiting professor in Japan, the fact is that I was living in front of a Buddhist temple, one of the numerous sects of Buddhist Zen in Japan. And in this temple, Buddhist temple, Zen Buddhist temple, there were practices Nembutsu. Nembutsu is a Japanese term which designates the recitation or repetition of the name of Buddha Amitabha. The Nembutsu, it's again a contemplative practice which can be practiced and performed during hours in specific rooms in Buddhist temples, which again, and it's practiced walking around. And again, this is possible. There is possibly a comparison with zikr practices in this specific Buddhist context called Nembutsu. So hesychasm and Nembutsu can be points of comparison and interfaith studies with Sufism. And I think I have finished my talk here, and I thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Alexander. The way you have analyzed the socio-interreligious dialogue in historical, anthropological, oriental, and musicological context is really highly appreciated. Due to the shortage of time, I am going to call Dr. Muhyiddin Hashmi, Dean, Faculty of Arabic and Islamic Studies, for the vote of thanks. Please beg.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajmain. Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Dr. Ziaul Qayyum Sahab, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I feel honored and privileged to get the opportunity to extend a vote of thanks on this special occasion. I would like to thank all the honorable guests, delegates who blessed us with their presence today. I am especially thankful to the international invited speakers, Professor Dr. Alexander Papas, who came all the way from Paris, France. Thanks to Dr. Triana Lyons from the Department of Education and Liberal Arts, University of Arizona, USA. Thanks Dr. Herman from Minhaj University, Lahore, and Professor Dr. Abu Sufyan Islahi, who came from Aligarh Muslim University, India. And all of us know that he has a long association with our Faculty of Arabic and Islamic Studies since several years. Many thanks to national invited speakers who have traveled from all over the country to join us in this event. On behalf of the organizing committee, I convey deep regards and hearty thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Dr. Ziaul Qayyum for his kind patronage and support. Definitely it would not have been possible to convene this great event without his generous support. Special thanks to Professor Alexander Papas for your enlightening and thought-provoking keynote address on Sufi practices and methodologies to undertake interfaith relations which I think remain most effective and most probably the most effective methodology to be undertook in the history, in the Islamic history for interfaith relations. As you know, an event of this dimension cannot happen overnight. The preparations are started several months in advance. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated faculty members, servicing departments, volunteers who are well trained in event management. I am very thankful to HEC for their partial sponsoring of the event. And at the end, I would like to take this opportunity to thank my dear colleague, Professor Dr. Shams, who worked day and night to make this event a success story. I'm hopeful that this effort by the Department of Interfaith Studies will bring together scholars of interfaith studies to exchange ideas on conference themes, having a long-term impact in strengthening interfaith relations between religious communities and ultimately contributing to global progress and welfare. Thanks to all of you for making this event successful. Have a wonderful stay at AIOU and the beautiful city of Islamabad. Thank you so much.
Dear audience, now it's the time to present shields among our worthy guests. To present the shields as a token of respect and honor, I would like to call upon before the stage worthy Vice Chancellor Dr. Professor Ziaul Qayyum, along with the worthy guests. Foreign guests, please come forward. A very warm welcome to all of you. First of all, I would like to invite Dr. Alexander Papas to come please and receive your sheet from worthy Vice Chancellor, sir. Please. Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Triana Leons, Department of Education and Liberal Arts, the University of Arizona Global Campus. Would you like to come forward and receive your shield, please? Dr. Abu Sufyan Islahi from Aligarh Muslim University, India. Sir, please come and receive your shield from Vice Chancellor, sir. Dr. Abu Sufyan Islahi from Aligarh Muslim University. Please give a big hand for him. Dr. Mayuddin Hashmi, Dean Faculty of Arabic and Islamic Studies, will receive his shield from worthy Vice Chancellor. Dr. Ghulam Shamsur Rahman, Chairman, Department of Interfaith Studies. Sir, please receive your shield from worthy Vice Chancellor, sir. Dr. Mohammad Sajjad, Associate Professor from Interfaith Studies. Sir, please come forward and receive your shield. Dr. Herman, Professor of Comparative Religion, Minhaj University, Lahore. Sir, please come. Dr. Herman, Department of Religion and Philosophy from Minhaj University, Lahore. Now, worthy Vice Chancellor will receive his shield from Dr. Alexander Papas. I would request to the Faculty of Arabic and Islamic Studies to come and for a group photo. Yes, sir. All the significant personalities, deans, senior professors, sir, please come. Dr. Sajidur Rahman, sir, please come. Dr. Akram, sir. Dr. Triana, Dr. Abu Sufyan, sir, please come forward. Dr. Sajjad. Thank you so much to everyone. We really appreciate you for all sparing time and gracing the event. Have a good day ahead. Just please be seated.